My name is Madison, and I am 32 years old. 16 years ago, my family abandoned me without warning, leaving me to build my life from absolute nothing. Yesterday, I received a text from my mother. After 16 years of silence, she wants to meet and make up for lost time. The irony isn't lost on me. Some time can't be bought back, and the life I built without them proves it. If you've ever had to rebuild your life after being let down by those who should have protected you, let me know where you're watching from and hit that like and subscribe button. I grew up in what appeared to be a typical middle-class family in a quiet suburb outside of Chicago, Illinois. From the outside looking in, we seemed normal. My father James worked in sales, my mother Sarah was a part-time receptionist at a dental office, and my younger brother Kyle was 4 years younger than me. We lived in a modest 3-bedroom house with a small backyard where we occasionally had summer barbecues when relatives visited. But beneath the surface, our family was fragile. My father struggled with alcoholism for as long as I can remember. He wasn't a violent drunk, but he was an absent one. Many evenings he would come home, grab a beer from the fridge, and disappear into the garage or basement until it was time for bed. My mother coped with her disappointment by emotionally checking out. She went through the motions of parenting, making meals, driving us to school, asking about homework. But there was always a distance in her eyes, like she was thinking about a life she should have had instead. Financial problems were a constant undercurrent in our home. Bills would pile up on the kitchen counter, and I would overhear hushed arguments about money late at night. Sometimes the electricity would be shut off for a day or two, and my mother would tell us it was because of a neighborhood issue. But even as a child, I knew better. Because of these dynamics, I found myself taking on a parental role with Kyle from an early age. I would help him with homework, make his lunch for school, and try to shield him from our parents' issues. When he had nightmares, it was my bed he would crawl into, not our parents'. I loved my brother fiercely and felt protective of him, even though it meant growing up faster than I should have. Despite everything, I had dreams. I wanted to become a doctor. I had always been fascinated by medicine and how the human body worked. I kept a journal where I would write down medical terms I learned from books I checked out from the library. My science teachers told me I had a natural aptitude for it, and I clung to that praise, hoping education would be my ticket to a more stable life. The one true source of stability in my childhood was my maternal grandmother, Eleanor. She lived about 30 minutes away, and visiting her house was like entering a different world. Everything was clean and organized. The refrigerator was always full. She had a beautiful garden where she grew vegetables and flowers, and she taught me how to tend to plants and appreciate their growth cycles. When I was with Grandma Eleanor, I felt like I could breathe. Madison, she would tell me, you have a good head on your shoulders. No matter what happens in life, no one can take away your intelligence or your kindness. Remember that. When I was around 14, the cracks in my parents' marriage began to widen into chasms. My father started staying out later, sometimes not coming home at all. My mother became even more withdrawn, spending hours on the computer in the evenings. The arguments became louder, more frequent, and happened even when Kyle and I were in the room. "You're a drunk and a failure," my mother would shout. "And you're a cold, miserable woman who makes everyone around her miserable too." My father would fire back. I would grab Kyle, and we would hide in my bedroom where I would turn up music or read him stories to drown out the fighting. I started working harder at school, staying late for study groups or club activities, anything to avoid being home. The summer I turned 15, my parents finally announced they were getting divorced. It wasn't a surprise, but it still felt like the floor had dropped out from under me. What would happen to our house? Would we have to move? Who would Kyle and I live with? Neither parent seemed particularly concerned about answering these questions. Then, in a cruel twist of fate, Grandma Eleanor had a sudden stroke and passed away 3 months later. I was devastated. Not only had I lost the one person who made me feel valued and secure, but I had also lost my safety net. Without her weekly wisdom and warmth, I felt adrift in a family that was disintegrating around me. Still, even as things fell apart, I clung to the belief that while my parents might divorce each other, they wouldn't abandon their children. I was anxious about the future, but I never imagined they would simply walk away. I thought we would adjust to a new normal, maybe split time between two households, or live primarily with one parent while visiting the other. I believed that despite their flaws, my parents loved us in their own way. I focused on doing well in school, thinking that if I could get scholarships to college, I could still pursue my dream of becoming a doctor. I kept trying to be a good sister to Kyle, assuring him that everything would be okay, even as our family fractured. I started picking up babysitting jobs on weekends to save money just in case. I was trying to plan for a future I thought I understood, never suspecting what was actually coming. Looking back, there were warning signs I missed. My father started selling furniture and belongings, claiming it was to simplify before the move. My mother became obsessed with her phone, smiling at text messages in a way I hadn't seen her smile in years. They both began to talk about Kyle and me as if we were roommates rather than children, commenting on how independent and self-sufficient we were becoming. But even with these hints, I never could have predicted what happened next. No child expects to be abandoned by both parents within the same week. No teenager plans for suddenly becoming homeless. And no amount of maturity at 16 prepares you for building a life entirely from scratch, with no support system and no safety net. The signs were there, but I couldn't read them, because who expects their parents to simply walk away? Who imagines that the people who brought you into this world would decide one day that you are no longer their responsibility? It goes against every natural instinct, every societal norm, every legal obligation. And yet that's exactly what my parents did. My 16th birthday fell on a Tuesday, and it passed without celebration. There was no cake, no presents, no acknowledgement beyond a mumbled, "Happy birthday," from my mother as she hurried out the door for work that morning. That evening, as I was helping Kyle with his math homework at the kitchen table, my father came home and called a family meeting. "I've accepted a job in California," he announced without preamble. "I'm leaving this weekend." My mother's face didn't register surprise, which told me she already knew. Kyle looked confused, but I felt a cold weight settling in my stomach. "What about us?" I asked. "Are we moving to California too?" My father avoided eye contact. "No, Madison. This is a fresh start for me. The job barely pays enough for one person, and I'll be staying in a studio apartment. There's no room for kids." Before I could process this, my mother cleared her throat. "I might as well tell you both now. I've met someone online who lives in Texas. I'm planning to move there next month." The room seemed to tilt. "So we'll go with you to Texas?" I asked, already knowing the answer. "That wouldn't work," she said, glancing at her phone. "Thomas has a small place, and he's not really comfortable around children. Besides, you're almost an adult now, Madison." "I'm 16, I said, my voice rising. "And Kyle is 12. We can't live alone." My parents exchanged a look. I'll never forget a look of mutual agreement that they were about to shed a burden. "We've arranged for Kyle to stay with your cousins in Ohio," my mother said. "Aunt Debbie and Uncle Mark agreed to take him." "But not me?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "You're mature enough to handle yourself," my father said. "You can apply for emancipation, or maybe one of your friends' families will let you stay with them." The next morning, I discovered another betrayal. I had been saving money from summer jobs for years, keeping it in a savings account my parents had helped me open. When I checked the balance, it was zero. When confronted, my mother admitted they had emptied it along with Kyle's college fund and their own accounts to finance their new starts. "We need this money to rebuild our lives," she said defensively. "You're smart and capable. You'll figure something out." I spent that evening frantically calling relatives begging for help. Most didn't answer. Those who did made excuses about not having space or resources. One aunt told me bluntly, "Your parents' problems aren't my responsibility, and neither are you." My father left 3 days later, handing me $200 in cash as he walked out the door. "This should help until you figure things out," he said, as if he were a neighbor lending me money for a school trip, not a father abandoning his child. My mother departed 4 days after that, taking Kyle to Ohio first, then continuing to Texas. Her goodbye was equally brief. She left a note with the utility company's phone numbers and a reminder that I should call about having the services disconnected since the bills were unpaid. That first night alone in our half-empty house was the most devastating experience of my life. The silence was deafening. I sat on the floor of my bedroom, my bed already sold by my father, and tried to comprehend what had happened. How could they both leave? What kind of parents abandoned their children? What had I done to deserve this? I tried calling both of them repeatedly that night, but my father's phone went straight to voicemail, and my mother had already changed her number. I was completely alone. The next day, I received notice that the house was in foreclosure, and I had 30 days to vacate. I also learned that the electricity would be shut off within a week due to unpaid bills. The water followed shortly after. I showered at school and charged my phone in the library. I ate free lunches at school and stretched my $200 as far as I could for dinners. I tried reaching out to Kyle at our aunt and uncle's house, but they refused to put him on the phone, saying it would be too emotional for him. Later, I would learn they moved to another state shortly after taking him in, effectively cutting me off from my brother completely. As the reality of my situation sank in, I was overcome with a mixture of emotions I had never experienced before. There was a bone-deep sense of betrayal that made it hard to breathe. There was a searing anger that made me want to scream until my voice gave out. But most overwhelming was the fear, raw, primal fear of what would happen to me. Where would I sleep? How would I eat? Who would help me if I got sick or hurt? The questions swirled in my mind like a tornado, destroying any sense of security I had ever felt in my life. I stood in the empty house that had once been my home, surrounded by the ghosts of a family that no longer existed, and realized that childhood was over. Any innocence or trust I had left was gone, replaced by the harsh knowledge that I was entirely on my own in a world that suddenly seemed very large and very cold. The day I dropped out of high school was the day reality truly hit me. I was 3 months into my junior year, maintaining a 3.8 GPA despite everything. But after sleeping in my car for 2 weeks, showering in the school gym, and trying to hide my situation from teachers and friends, I realized something had to give. I couldn't maintain academic excellence while fighting for basic survival. I walked into the administration office and filled out the paperwork, ignoring the counselor's concerned questions and persuasive arguments about my bright future. What good was a bright future if I didn't survive the present? I needed money for food and a place to live, now not college prospects 4 years from now. That same day, I applied for jobs all over town. Most places wouldn't hire a 16-year-old dropout for full-time work, but Dot's Diner on the edge of town was desperate enough to look the other way. The owner, a tired-looking woman named Marge, hired me to wash dishes and bus tables for minimum wage plus whatever tips the servers wanted to share, which wasn't much. The work was grueling. I would arrive at 5 in the morning to help with breakfast prep, spend the day washing endless stacks of dishes in scalding water that left my hands raw, and finish late at night after cleaning the kitchen. My back ached constantly from standing, and the smell of grease permeated everything I owned. Finding affordable housing proved nearly impossible. No one would rent to an underage girl with no credit history, no references, and a job that barely covered food expenses. I continued sleeping in my car, parking in different spots each night to avoid attracting attention. I joined a gym with the cheapest monthly rate I could find solely for shower access. Winter in Illinois was brutal. Some nights the temperature dropped below zero, and I would run my car's heater just long enough to avoid freezing, careful to conserve gas I couldn't afford to replace. I developed a persistent cough that wouldn't go away and lost weight I couldn't afford to lose. I tried reaching out to extended family members again. Cousins, great aunts, distant relatives. I barely knew. Each call ended the same way: awkward excuses, hollow sympathy, and ultimately rejection. We really don't have the space right now. We're struggling ourselves. Have you tried a youth shelter? The worst was my maternal grandfather, who simply said, "Your parents made their choice, and I respect that. Maybe you should too." As my situation became impossible to hide, I lost friends too. Some simply stopped inviting me places when they realized I couldn't reciprocate. Others became uncomfortable with my circumstances, unsure how to act around someone experiencing homelessness. A few tried to help at first, letting me shower at their homes or bringing me leftovers from family dinners. But their parents eventually discouraged these acts of charity, worried about liability or the influence of my unstable situation on their own children. The lowest point came when I tried to find a room to rent and met with a landlord who offered to waive the security deposit and reduce rent if I would be friendly to him when he visited. The way his eyes lingered on my body made his meaning unmistakable. I left immediately, shaking with fear and disgust, but the encounter planted a seed of desperation. How far would I have to fall before compromising myself became the only option for survival? My mental health deteriorated rapidly. I developed severe anxiety, jumping at sudden noises and constantly looking over my shoulder. Trust became a foreign concept. When people offered help, I scrutinized their motives. When strangers were kind, I waited for the catch. Every night, I would lie awake in my car, wondering if this was all my life would ever be a constant struggle just to exist. Then came the medical emergency. I had been ignoring abdominal pain for days, attributing it to hunger or stress. Until one night at work, the pain became so intense, I collapsed in the kitchen. A coworker called an ambulance despite my protests. At the hospital, I was diagnosed with appendicitis requiring immediate surgery. When I woke up, two things happened. I was handed a bill I had no way of paying, and I was questioned by a social worker suspicious of an underage girl with no emergency contacts. I lied smoothly, saying my parents were traveling abroad, but that I could reach them soon. The social worker seemed doubtful, but had too many cases to pursue mine aggressively. I was discharged with antibiotics I couldn't afford and a $12,000 medical bill that would haunt me for years. I returned to work too soon, tearing my stitches and developing an infection that left a permanent scar, a physical reminder of a time when my health was secondary to survival. To pay for the antibiotics and start addressing the medical debt, I took on a second job at a gas station, working night shifts after finishing at the diner. I was sleeping maybe 4 hours a day, usually in the gas station parking lot between shifts. My entire existence became work, and even that wasn't enough to get ahead. That December marked my first Christmas alone. The diner was closed, so I had no place to go and no reason to pretend it was a special day. I sat in my car in an empty parking lot eating a sandwich and searched for my parents on social media. I found nothing for my father. My mother had a profile but had blocked me. I found a distant cousin's page with photos of family gatherings, and there was Kyle looking taller but unhappy in a family portrait with our aunt and uncle. I cried until I had no tears left, then fell asleep to the sound of Christmas carols playing faintly from a nearby apartment. By spring, exhaustion and depression had worn me down to a shell of myself. I lost track of days. I stopped looking in mirrors because I didn't recognize the hollow-eyed girl staring back. I began to question if life was worth the constant struggle, if fighting so hard just to exist was really better than not existing at all. The dark thoughts crept in during quiet moments, whispering that maybe there was an easier way out, a way to finally rest. What kept me going was simple stubbornness. I refused to let my parents be right about discarding me. I refused to become another statistic, another homeless teen who disappeared into the cracks of society. And somewhere beneath the layers of hurt and hardness that had formed around my heart, I still believed I deserved better than this, not because anyone told me so, but because I had decided it for myself. The day Laura noticed me sleeping in my car changed everything. She was a waitress at the diner, about 50 years old, with dyed red hair and more energy than women half her age. I had been working at Dots for almost 8 months by then, and while we were friendly, we weren't close. That changed when she knocked on my car window at 6 in the morning, startling me awake. I panicked, thinking I was about to be fired or reported, but she just handed me a cup of coffee through the window. I cautiously rolled down. "I've seen you sleeping here for months," she said matter-of-factly. "I have a spare room. The rent's cheap and it comes with a real bed. You interested?" I was so stunned I couldn't speak. Part of me was suspicious. People didn't just offer help without wanting something in return. But Laura's expression held no pity, no judgment, just practical concern from one working woman to another. "I don't need an answer now," she said. "But winter's coming again, and car heaters only do so much. Think about it." I did think about it for all of 2 days before accepting her offer. Laura's spare room was small but clean, with a twin-bed dresser and window that caught the morning sun. She charged me half what a room normally went for in that area, and for the first time in over a year, I slept through the night without fear. Laura became more than a landlord or coworker. She became the first member of my chosen family. She never tried to mother me or fix me. She simply offered stability and respect. She taught me practical skills, like how to cook inexpensive but nutritious meals, how to maintain a car to avoid costly repairs, and how to negotiate with bill collectors. "Life's hard enough without adding shame to the mix," she would say. "We all need help sometimes. The trick is to accept it gracefully and pass it on when you can." With stable housing came the ability to plan beyond immediate survival. Laura encouraged me to get my GED, even helping me study after long shifts. I passed the exam with scores high enough to qualify for academic scholarships, a small victory that felt enormous at the time. With my GED in hand, I applied for a receptionist position at a local insurance office. The pay was slightly better than the diner, the hours were regular, and most importantly, it offered a path forward. The office manager, a woman named Diane, took a chance on me despite my age and lack of experience. Looking back, I realized she probably saw what Laura saw, a young woman determined to rebuild her life from nothing. With a stable job and housing, I started taking night classes at the community college. Business management wasn't my childhood dream of medicine, but it was practical and aligned with skills I was developing at work. Each small step forward helped heal a piece of the wound my parents had left. Slowly, I began to form friendships again. There was Jasmine from my accounting class who invited me to study groups and never pried when I declined social invitations I couldn't afford. There was Tomas, the IT guy at the insurance office, who fixed my ancient laptop for free and taught me computer skills that made me more valuable at work. And there was Diana, Laura's niece, who became like a sister to me, including me in family gatherings, where I was treated as if I belonged. These people became my chosen family, filling the void left by those who should have protected me, but chose not to. They celebrated my small victories, supported me through setbacks, and never once made me feel like a charity case. One of the most significant moments of this period was making the dean's list at the community college. I called Laura from campus, my voice shaking with excitement. She insisted on taking me out to dinner to celebrate, inviting Jasmine and Diana as well. It was the first time anyone had celebrated an achievement of mine in years, and I felt a crack forming in the wall I had built around my heart. During my second year at community college, I met Professor Thomas in a business ethics class. Unlike other instructors who saw me as just another student, he recognized something in my work, a perspective shaped by experiences most college students hadn't faced. After class one day, he asked about my plans after graduation. "I'm not sure," I admitted. "I need to keep working full-time, so maybe finish my bachelor's degree online eventually." "You have potential that shouldn't be wasted," he said. "There's a scholarship program for non-traditional students at State University. The application deadline is next month. I'd like to recommend you." With his guidance, I applied for and received a scholarship that covered most of my tuition for a bachelor's degree in business administration. It still required working full-time while taking classes, but it put a 4-year degree within reach, something I hadn't dared dream about during those nights sleeping in my car. My graduation day from community college was bittersweet. As I watched other students celebrating with parents and siblings, I felt the absence of my family acutely. But when I looked to the audience and saw Laura Diana Jasmine Tomas, and even Professor Thomas cheering for me, I realized that family isn't always defined by blood. Sometimes it's defined by who shows up when it matters. With my associate degree and 2 years of office experience, I landed an entry-level position at a marketing firm in the city. The commute was long, but the opportunities for advancement were real. I threw myself into learning everything I could about the business, volunteering for projects, staying late, and making myself indispensable. During this time, I also started therapy. Laura connected me with a community mental health center that offered services on a sliding scale. My therapist, Dr. Nguyen, specialized in trauma and abandonment issues. The work wasn't easy. Peeling back layers of hurt and examining the beliefs I had formed about myself and others was painful and exhausting. "What your parents did says everything about them, and nothing about you," Dr. Nguyen would remind me. "You were not abandoned because you were unlovable or unworthy. You were abandoned because they were incapable of proper parenting." Intellectually, I understood this. Emotionally, acceptance came much more slowly. But with each session, each small breakthrough, I felt myself becoming stronger, more whole. The abandoned 16-year-old was still part of me, but she no longer defined me. As I approached my 24th birthday, I looked at my life with a sense of cautious pride. I had a decent job, was working toward my bachelor's degree, had a small but solid support system, and was learning to trust again. The path hadn't been easy, and I carried scars both visible and invisible. But I was building something meaningful from the ashes of abandonment, a life that was wholly mine, created through persistence and resilience, rather than inherited or given. What I didn't know then was that the foundation I had worked so hard to build was about to support achievements beyond what I could imagine, and that the family I had pieced together would help me reach heights that those who abandoned me would one day witness from a distance, with regret they had not earned the right to express. By my late 20s, my career had advanced significantly from that first marketing position. I had completed my bachelor's degree while working full-time, graduated with honors, and been promoted 3 times. Each step up the corporate ladder brought more responsibility, better compensation, and a growing reputation in the industry. The most significant leap came when I identified an underserved niche in the market and proposed a new division focused on digital marketing for small businesses. My boss was skeptical, but gave me 6 months to prove the concept. Within 4 months, we had signed enough clients to make the division profitable, and I was named director of the new department. This success gave me the confidence and capital to consider something I had quietly dreamed about for years, starting my own business. I spent evenings and weekends developing a business plan, researching market opportunities, and building a network of potential clients. Laura, now retired from the diner, but still my biggest supporter, let me use her dining room table as an office on weekends, bringing me coffee and offering practical feedback on my ideas. At 30, I took the leap and founded Madison Marketing Solutions, specializing in helping small and medium-sized businesses develop effective digital marketing strategies. The first year was terrifying. There were months when I wasn't sure I could make payroll or pay my own rent. But gradually, word of mouth spread. Clients recommended me to other businesses. My reputation for delivering results on tight budgets attracted companies that larger agencies ignored. By the end of the second year, I had hired 3 employees and moved from my tiny home office to a real commercial space. By the third year, my company was turning a healthy profit, and I was being invited to speak at industry conferences. The girl who once couldn't afford a place to sleep now owned a thriving business and was financially secure for the first time in her life. As my professional life flourished, so did my personal life. I met Andrew at a charity event where I was providing pro bono marketing services. He worked for a nonprofit focused on supporting foster youth aging out of the system, a cause that resonated deeply with my own experience. Although I hadn't been in the foster system, I understood the challenges of navigating adulthood without family support. Andrew was different from any man I had dated before. He was patient with my trust issues and never pushed for more than I was ready to give. He understood why I needed to maintain financial independence, even as our relationship deepened. Most importantly, he saw my history not as a source of damage, but as the forge that had shaped my strength. "Your resilience is beautiful," he told me on our third date after I had shared some of my story. "Not everyone could have built what you have from nothing." Our relationship progressed naturally without the rush or drama I had experienced in previous attempts at romance. After 2 years of dating, Andrew proposed, and I said yes, though not without trepidation. Marriage meant family, and family was complicated for me. But Andrew's family welcomed me completely. His parents, John and Maria, treated me like a daughter from our first meeting. His sisters included me in family traditions and inside jokes. Holidays at their home were warm and chaotic in the best way, so different from the tense, performative family gatherings of my childhood. "We've been waiting for Andrew to find someone special," Maria told me at our engagement dinner. "We're so happy it's you." I tried to explain to Dr. Wynne why their easy acceptance was almost harder to handle than rejection would have been. "It makes me realize what I missed," I said during a therapy session. "It shows me what family is supposed to be, and it makes me angry all over again about what mine wasn't." "That anger is valid," she responded, "but don't let it prevent you from accepting the love that's being offered now." Andrew and I bought the house together, a modern 3-bedroom with a fenced yard in a good neighborhood. It was larger than we needed for just the 2 of us, but we both wanted children eventually. The day we signed the mortgage papers, I sat in the empty living room after the realtor left and cried. "What's wrong?" Andrew asked, concerned. "Nothing's wrong," I assured him. "I just never thought I would have this a real home that no one can take away." After our wedding, the question of children became more immediate. I wanted to be a mother, but the prospect terrified me. What if I had inherited my parents' capacity for abandonment? What if the cycle repeated itself? I shared these fears with Andrew late one night. "What if I don't know how to be a good mother? I have no model to follow." "You know exactly what not to do," he pointed out. "And you have more empathy and strength than anyone I know. Our child will be lucky to have you as their mother." Still, we decided to wait another year, giving me time to work through these fears in therapy. Dr. Wynne helped me see that my hypervigilance about potentially harming a child was itself evidence that I would not repeat my parents' mistakes. When I discovered I was pregnant a year later, joy and panic arrived in equal measure. Throughout the pregnancy, I had nightmares about abandoning my baby or being unable to care for them properly. Andrew would hold me through these episodes, reminding me that our child would have 2 committed parents and an extended family of support, everything I had lacked. The birth of our daughter, Lily, was transformative. The moment the nurse placed her in my arms, I felt a love so fierce and protective it took my breath away. I made a silent promise to this tiny person that she would never know the pain of abandonment, that she would grow up feeling secure in her family's love. "She has your eyes," Andrew said, his voice thick with emotion. "And hopefully nothing else from my side of the family," I replied. Andrew's face grew serious. "Your strength, Your resilience, your compassion. I hope she inherits all of that from you. Motherhood changed me in ways I hadn't anticipated. I found myself creating family traditions I had never experienced, birthday celebrations that were actually celebrated, holiday rituals that centered on joy rather than obligation, everyday moments of connection that built a foundation of security. I became deliberate about telling Lily she was loved, showing her through actions that she was valued, teaching her that home was a place of safety and acceptance. As Lily grew from infant to toddler, my business continued to thrive. We won a major industry award for a campaign we developed for a women-owned, sustainable fashion brand. Our client list expanded to include several nationally recognized companies. I hired more staff and moved to larger offices. The financial security I had fought so hard for was now firmly established with savings investments and a retirement plan safeguards against the precariousness I had once lived with. Occasionally, I would search for information about Kyle online. My brother would be in his late 20s now, and I wondered what had become of him. Had our relatives provided him with stability? Had he gone to college? Was he happy? My searches yielded nothing conclusive. There were too many Kyle Wilsons in the world, and without knowing where he had ended up, I couldn't narrow it down. I deliberately did not search for my parents. I had made a conscious decision years ago to focus on building my future, rather than looking back at those who had chosen not to be part of it. I had no interest in knowing where they were, or what they were doing. They had made their choice, and I had made mine, to create a life and family based on love and commitment rather than biological obligation. Then came the text message that shattered the careful equilibrium I had established, forcing me to confront the past I had worked so hard to move beyond. The message arrived on a Tuesday afternoon while I was reviewing quarterly projections with my finance director. My phone buzzed with a notification, and I glanced down automatically, expecting an email from a client or a text from Andrew about dinner plans. Instead, I saw, "Madison, this is your mother. I've been thinking about you a lot lately. I miss my daughter. Can we talk?" The world seemed to stop. My hands went numb, and a high-pitched ringing filled my ears. I must have visibly paled because my finance director stopped mid-sentence to ask if I was all right. I mumbled something about needing a moment and stumbled to my office, closing the door behind me. I sat at my desk, staring at the text, unable to process that after 16 years of silence, my mother had reached out as casually as if we had spoken last week. Before I could decide how to respond, or whether to respond at all, another message arrived. "Your father is back in town too. We've both been following your business success online. We're so proud of what you've accomplished." The presumption of that statement, "we're so proud," sent a surge of anger through me so powerful it broke through my shock. What right did they have to pride in achievements they had played no part in? What right did they have to follow my life from afar while contributing nothing to it? I was still staring at the phone when Andrew found me an hour later, having been called by my concerned assistant. He took one look at my face and knew something serious had happened. When I showed him the texts, his expression hardened in a way I rarely saw from my normally gentle husband. "You don't owe them a response," he said firmly. "You don't owe them anything." But more messages followed over the next few days, each one more presumptuous than the last. My mother asked to meet as a family. My father texted from his own number saying he had always known I would be successful. Most disturbing was a message suggesting they wanted to meet Lily to be grandparents and make up for lost time. The phrase, "make up for lost time," triggered something primal in me. 16 years of abandonment, 16 birthdays, Christmases, graduations, the nights spent hungry and afraid in my car, the medical debt I had carried for years, the therapy I still needed to manage trust issues, the brother I had lost contact with. How exactly did they propose to make up for any of that? I found myself in the bathroom of our office having a full-blown panic attack for the first time in years. My assistant called Andrew, who arrived within minutes, and drove me home where I curled up on our bed, shaking uncontrollably. "I built all of this without them," I kept saying. "They don't get to walk back in now that the hard part is done." In the days that followed, I sought advice from those closest to me. My friends and chosen family had different perspectives. Laura was unequivocally against any meeting. "They had their chance to be parents and they blew it," she said flatly. "You don't get a do-over on abandoning your kid." Jasmine, who had reconciled with her own estranged father years earlier, suggested that meeting them might provide closure. "You don't have to forgive them or let them into your life, but maybe seeing them once would help you put the past to rest." Dr. Wynne took a measured approach. "Whatever you decide, it should be for your well-being, not theirs. Ask yourself what outcome would bring you the most peace." Andrew supported whatever decision I made but was protective of our family. "If you do meet them, I want to be there. And they are not meeting Lily unless you're absolutely certain it's safe emotionally." As I wrestled with the decision, I decided to learn more about what my parents had been doing for the past 16 years. Through social media and public records, I discovered that neither had found the fresh start they had abandoned me for. My father had been through 3 rehab programs for alcoholism and had never held a steady job in California. He had returned to Illinois 4 years ago after a DUI conviction. My mother's relationship with Thomas from Texas had lasted less than a year, after which she had cycled through several similar relationships, each ending badly. She had moved back to the Midwest about 2 years ago and was working as a cashier at a discount store. Most tellingly, I found court records showing both had declared bankruptcy, my father twice. Their sudden interest in reconnecting coincided with my company being featured in a prominent business magazine that had mentioned our growing client list and successful expansion. The truth became clear: they didn't want a relationship with their daughter. They wanted access to her resources. They didn't want to be grandparents to Lily. They wanted the benefits of family without having earned the title. They saw me not as the child they had wronged, but as a potential solution to their financial problems. This realization should have made my decision easier, but it complicated it. Part of me wanted to meet them just to reject them to their faces, to show them exactly what they had thrown away and could never reclaim. Another part feared that seeing them would reopen wounds that had taken years to heal. And a small, stubborn part of me, the part that had once been a 16-year-old girl, desperate for her parents' love, wondered if there was any genuine remorse beneath their self-interest. The messages continued becoming more frequent and insistent. They spoke of family obligations and blood being thicker than water, invoking principles they had abandoned along with me. Each text picked at the scar tissue I had developed over years of healing. Finally, after 2 weeks of this internal struggle, I made my decision. I would meet them once in a public place without Lily. I would hear what they had to say what I needed to say, and then decide if there was any basis for future contact. I would not go seeking revenge or validation, but clarity and closure. I texted my mother, "I'll meet you both at Westside Cafe this Saturday at 2 p.m. Just me, not my family. One meeting, no promises beyond that." Her response came immediately. "We can't wait to see you, sweetheart. We have so much to catch up on." The casual endearment made my stomach turn, but I was committed now. As Saturday approached, I prepared myself emotionally, working with Dr. Wynne on setting boundaries and managing expectations. Andrew helped me rehearse responses to potential manipulative tactics. Laura reminded me that I was meeting them from a position of power, not vulnerability. I was no longer the helpless teenager they had discarded. "Remember," she said the night before, "you're not 16 anymore. You're a successful businesswoman, a loving mother, a strong woman who built herself from nothing. They have no power over you unless you give it to them." With those words in mind, I walked into the cafe that Saturday, ready to face the people who had once been my parents, but were now strangers who wanted something from me rather than the other way around. The tables had turned in ways they couldn't possibly understand, and I was finally ready to sit at the head of that table rather than beneath it. I arrived at Westside Cafe 15 minutes early, deliberately choosing a table near the front with a clear view of the door. I wanted to see them before they saw me, to have those crucial moments, to compose myself before the actual encounter. I ordered a coffee and sat with my back straight, hands folded calmly on the table, the posture I used for difficult client meetings. They arrived 5 minutes late, and I almost didn't recognize them. 16 years had aged them far more than time alone could account for. My father, once tall and commanding despite his flaws, now stooped slightly, his hair completely gray, his face mapped with the distinctive broken capillaries of long-term alcohol abuse. My mother, who had always taken pride in her appearance, looked tired and drawn, her once stylish clothes replaced by discount store basics that hung awkwardly on her frame. They spotted me immediately. I still looked enough like my teenage self to be recognizable, though now in tailored business casual attire rather than the second-hand clothes of my youth. Their faces lit up with an enthusiasm that seemed rehearsed, and they hurried to my table. "Madison? Oh my God, look at you!" my mother exclaimed, moving as if to hug me. I remained seated, my expression neutral, and she awkwardly diverted to sitting down instead. "You look great, kiddo," my father said, using the nickname he had abandoned along with me 16 years ago. "Really great." "Thank you for agreeing to meet us," my mother added, her eyes darting around the cafe as if assessing its quality. "We have so much to talk about." "Yes," I said simply, my voice steady. "We do." An uncomfortable silence followed, which they rushed to fill with superficial observations. "We saw that article about your company in Business Monthly," my father said. "Pretty impressive stuff." "Your website looks very professional," my mother added. "And we drove by your office building. It's in a nice area." They continued in this vein, commenting on the external markers of my success, while showing no interest in the journey that had led to it. They asked no questions about my education, my struggles, my feelings. Instead, they spoke as if my life had been on pause while they were gone, and now we could simply resume where we had left off. After 20 minutes of this one-sided conversation, my mother finally broached what I suspected was their real agenda. "So, we heard you have a daughter now," she said, trying to sound casual. "We'd love to meet our granddaughter. And that husband of yours seems like a good guy from what we could see online," my father added. "We should all get together like a real family reunion." The phrase, "real family," was what finally broke my carefully maintained composure. "Let's be clear about something," I said, my voice quiet but firm. "You forfeited the right to be my real family when you abandoned me at 16 with $200 and an empty house about to be foreclosed on." They both began to protest simultaneously, but I held up my hand. "I agreed to this meeting to hear what you had to say, and now I'd like you to hear what I have to say." I took a deep breath, centering myself. 16 years ago, you both decided that your parental responsibilities were optional, that I was mature enough to fend for myself while you pursued your new lives. Do you have any idea what happened after you left? Neither answered, their eyes dropping to the table. I spent months sleeping in my car. I dropped out of high school to work full-time washing dishes. I developed pneumonia that winter, but couldn't afford a doctor until I collapsed at work. I lost contact with Kyle completely. I was approached by predatory men who saw a vulnerable girl and tried to take advantage. I went hungry, I was afraid, and I was completely alone. My voice remained steady, not rising or breaking. This wasn't an emotional outburst, but a calm recitation of facts they needed to hear. Everything I have now, I built without you. Every achievement was earned despite your abandonment, not because of your parenting. I put myself through school, working multiple jobs. I started my business from nothing. I created a life and family based on love and commitment concepts you clearly didn't understand. My father cleared his throat, looking uncomfortable. Madison, we made mistakes. We were going through a hard time. So was I interrupted. I was 16, and both my parents decided I wasn't worth taking with them. That's not a mistake. That's a choice you made repeatedly every day for 16 years when you didn't call, didn't write, didn't check if I was alive or dead. My mother's eyes welled with tears. We want to make it up to you. We want to be part of your life now. Why now? I asked directly. Is it because I have something you want? A successful business, financial stability, a happy family, things you failed to build in your own lives? Their reactions told me everything. My father looked away while my mother's tears dried up remarkably quickly. That's not fair, she said defensively. We're your parents. We just want a relationship with our daughter. Parents are defined by their actions, not their biology, I replied. I have people in my life who earned the right to be called family by showing up when it mattered, by supporting me, by loving me consistently. You're just strangers who happen to share my DNA. I took another sip of my now cold coffee, gathering my thoughts. I didn't come here for revenge or to make you feel guilty. I came to be clear about where we stand. If you genuinely want some kind of relationship moving forward, it would need to start with acknowledgement of what you did and the harm it caused. It would require professional family therapy and demonstrated change over time. It would begin with a relationship with me, just me, before any discussion of meeting my husband or daughter. The terms I laid out were fair, but demanding, requiring genuine effort and change on their part. As I suspected, their reaction revealed their true intentions. That seems unnecessarily complicated, my father said, frowning. We've apologized. Can't we just move forward as a family? We're not getting any younger, and we'd like to know our granddaughter. Lily isn't your granddaughter in any meaningful sense of the word, I said firmly. She's my daughter, and my responsibility is to protect her, not to provide you with a relationship you haven't earned. This is ridiculous, my mother said, her voice hardening. You're punishing us for ancient history. People make mistakes. Families forgive each other. This isn't about forgiveness, I explained. This is about trust, which is earned, not given. And it's about Lily, who deserves grandparents who would never abandon her, not ones who abandoned their own child when it became inconvenient to be parents. As their veneer of contrition cracked further, the conversation devolved into recriminations and guilt-tripping. My father implied I was selfish for not helping family in need. My mother suggested I was bitter and unforgiving. Neither addressed the actual harm they had done or took responsibility for their actions. After listening to this for several minutes, I gathered my purse and prepared to leave. I came today hoping there might be a basis for some kind of relationship moving forward, I said. But I can see now that you haven't changed. You still see me as a means to an end rather than a person with valid feelings and boundaries. I stood up, feeling a profound sense of closure I hadn't expected. I wish you both well, but I won't be inviting you into my life or my family's life. The door isn't permanently closed, but it can only be opened with genuine change on your part, not just words. As I walked away, my mother called after me. You can't just pretend we don't exist. We're your parents. I turned back briefly. You pretended I didn't exist for 16 years. I'm not pretending anything. I'm making a choice about who belongs in my life based on how they treat me and the people I love. It's the same choice you made, just with different criteria. Walking to my car, I felt lighter than I had in weeks. I had faced my past and found it held no power over me anymore. The abandoned girl who still lived somewhere in my heart could finally rest, knowing that she had grown into a woman strong enough to protect herself and her family from those who had once hurt her so deeply. That evening, as I told Andrew about the meeting, I made another decision. I want to find Kyle, I said. Not just online searches, but really find him. I want to hire a private investigator if necessary. The search for my brother became my new focus. If he had experienced even a fraction of the abandonment issues I had, he deserved to know he wasn't alone. Unlike my parents, who had chosen to walk away, Kyle had been just as much a victim as I was. 3 months and one skilled private investigator later, I found him living in Washington State, working as an IT specialist. Our first phone call lasted 4 hours, both of us crying and laughing as we reconnected across the years and distance. He had his own abandonment story. Our aunt and uncle had treated him as a burden, moving him across the country, and eventually sending him to boarding school to avoid parental responsibility. When Kyle flew to Illinois to meet me, Andrew and Lily, it felt like finding a missing piece of myself. He had the same eyes, the same laugh, the same resilient spirit that had allowed him to build a life despite the odds. We promised never to lose touch again. As for my parents, they made several more attempts to contact me, each message more demanding or guilt-inducing than the last. I did not respond. Eventually, the messages stopped. I heard through Kyle that they had approached him too with similar results. He had his own boundaries to establish and protect. In choosing to walk away from toxic relationships, even those with biological parents, I wasn't being unforgiving. I was being protective of the life and family I had built with such care. Some time can't be bought back. Some bonds once broken cannot be repaired with words alone. And some relationships are defined not by their beginning, but by their absence, teaching us, through their void, what we will never accept again. The life I built without my parents stands as both testament to my resilience and evidence of their failure. But more importantly, it stands as a foundation for something better, a family based on choice and commitment rather than obligation, a home where love is demonstrated daily rather than merely claimed, and a future where the cycles of abandonment end with me. Have you ever had to make the difficult decision to keep toxic family members at a distance? Or have you rebuilt your life after someone let you down? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this resonated with you, please hit the like button, subscribe to hear more stories, and share this with someone who might need to be reminded that family is defined by love and presence, not just DNA. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember, sometimes the family we choose is more valuable than the family we're born into.